Hey everybody, it's Amy Berger here again. Thanks for joining me for another video on how to do keto simply and without losing your mind. Sorry there was no video last week. I really do want to try to have these be at least once a week, but I'm moving and my apartment is still kind of in disarray, so I'm just in this one little corner because there's boxes and stuff everywhere else. This is kind of the only reasonable place I can record right now. This video is going to be a little bit longer than I want to make most of these. This is a very big topic we're covering today, and it could easily be two videos, but I'm going to just make it one that's a little bit longer than normal. Today's topic is omega-6 and omega-3 fats, and it's kind of a continuation of my previous video on food quality. I started to mention the omega-6, omega-3 issue, and then I said, you know what, it's such a big issue, let me just make it a separate video. So here we are, this is that separate video. Before I get into it, as usual, some admin, some house cleaning. Thank you so much for all the positive feedback you've been sending in, for all the likes and all the shares of the videos. Please, as always, feel free to share these on your keto and low carb groups. And if you have a question or a comment that you absolutely have to make sure I see or respond to, send me an email, tuitnutrition@gmail.com. I can't guarantee that I'll see it in the comments on the video. I just don't have the time to keep up with all of those. Thanks for watching, and let's get into it. Why is the omega-6, omega-3 thing an issue? Why do we have to talk about it? Well, omega-6 fats, and I'll explain what those are in a minute, but omega-6 fats are associated with any number of really gnarly, undesirable health things, right? Cancer, type 2 diabetes, obesity, inflammation, skin conditions, autoimmune conditions, you name it. And excessive intake of this omega-6 fat is, again, associated with it, seems to exacerbate it, cause it, whatever. But here's the thing, and we'll get into the details on all of this, but the thing to remember is that there's a lot of people who adopt a low carb or ketogenic diet and don't really pay much attention to the fat, sources at all. It could be regular corn oil, soybean oil, pastured lard, lard from pastured pigs, tallow from grass-finished cattle and sheep, and the most pristine pastured dairy butter you can get. And even without paying attention to where the fat comes from, when we dramatically decrease the sugar and starch, people have phenomenal results on this diet. There's a little bit of controversy, but the thing to remember is, again, even when people don't really pay much attention to the source of the fat or the makeup of the fat, they can still do really well with a low carb diet. And if I look down, it's because, as sometimes in previous videos I have notes, this is a big topic and I didn't want to forget anything that I really want to mention. So what are omega-3s and omega-6s? They're different kinds of fats, and they are both what we call essential fatty acids. You'll see this abbreviated as EFAs. And the reason they're called essential is because when something is essential in a dietary sense, it means that we absolutely must get it from food sources or from the diet, because the human body cannot synthesize it internally. It's not essential in the sense that morning coffee is essential for me to function as a human. For something to be nutritionally essential, it means that we must get it from the outside because we can't produce it, we can't make it. And both omega-3 and omega-6 are essential fatty acids. Now, I shouldn't say that. The parent omega-3 and omega-6, there's a lot of different kinds of omega-3 fats and different kinds of omega-6 fats. The parent omega-3, which is called alpha-linolenic acid, and the parent omega-6, which is called linoleic acid, are dietarily essential. And both of these types of fats are found in numerous kinds of foods. Because of the high omega-6 content, you'll hear even people saying, oh, don't eat pork, or don't eat, I don't eat poultry anymore because of the omega-6, and don't eat almonds, and oh, don't you dare touch a cashew, so much omega-6. We're kind of doing a little bit of fear mongering that I think is not really helpful for a lot of people, especially people that are new to the low carb way of eating. Um, so let's explain a little more. Omega-3 and omega-6 are both what we call polyunsaturated fatty acids. You'll see this abbreviated as PUFA. Some people will even just say PUFA as if it's a word. So polyunsaturated fatty acids, not to geek out too much, but you kind of need to understand some of this to understand what some of the problems are with these fats. Polyunsaturated fatty acids are called polyunsaturated because they have multiple double bonds. Unsaturated means they have double bonds. Poly means they have more than one. And where they get the name omega-3 or omega-6 has to do with where the occurrence of this first double bond is in the molecule of the fat in relation to what's called the methyl end. Don't worry about that, but one particular end of the fatty acid. How many carbon atoms in does this double bond occur? In an omega-3 fat, it's on the third carbon from the methyl end. In an omega-6, it's on the sixth carbon from the methyl end. That's just, gee whiz information in case you're ever on Jeopardy someday. There's also omega-7 fats and omega-9 fats. You may have never heard them called that, but omega-7, an example of an omega-7 fat is palmitoleic acid. And we find that in macadamia nuts. We also find it in ruminant fats. So fat and dairy products from cows, sheep, goats, things like that. Omega-9, an example of an omega-9 fat is oleic acid, which is found, it's the predominant type of fat in olive oil, in avocados, in macadamias. The palmitoleic is in macadamia, but oleic acid is the predominant fat. It's also the predominant fat in lard, believe it or not, in bacon fat, in pork fat. Pork fat is not predominantly saturated fat, it's predominantly monounsaturated. And of that monounsaturated, it's predominantly oleic acid, the same special super anointed halo wearing fat that's in olive oil that everybody thinks is so healthy for you, right? Anyway, getting back to why the chemical structure of these fats is important. Double bonds chemically make a fat unstable or fragile. These double bonds are easily, I wouldn't say broken, they're easily oxidized. When we use the word oxidize or oxidation with regard to a fat or a fatty acid, it basically means turning the fat rancid. If you've ever had a jar of oil or a jar of nuts sit around too long and it turns rancid and develops that really foul odor and flavor, that's rancidity. And it's a sign that these unsaturated fats in the oil or in the nuts or the food or the seeds, the fats have gone bad basically. And there's three things that can make this happen. There's three things that can cause the oxidation or the rancidity with regard to an unstable, fragile, unsaturated fat. And those are heat, light, and air. So when you think about it, you wouldn't want to heat something like corn oil or soybean oil or grapeseed oil or cottonseed oil because these oils are very, very high in this omega-6 fat. So it's very easily damaged, very easily turned rancid. You would not buy one of those gallon jugs of corn oil that you see at the store for pennies and put it in your frying pan. It's obviously exposed to heat. It's also exposed to air and to light. But just think also of all those clear plastic jugs sitting on the supermarket shelves where those oils are exposed to lights, in some cases 24/7, right? We've got these stores open 24/7, 24 hours a day. The thing is though, even if you don't cook with them, just the mere manufacturing process, the process by which these oils are extracted and deodorized and strained and decolored and the way they're manufactured exposes them to all three of these damaging elements, the heat, the light, and the air. You can Google, you can search if you want for the manufacturing process of these oils. It's very gnarly, very nasty. And so basically these oils are rancid and spoiled even before you bring them home from the store, before you would even try to cook with them. They're already damaged. And the thing is, you don't know they're damaged because the manufacturers actually remove the foul smell. They deodorize them. They strain the weird particulate matter out of it. They can make it less cloudy. They make it nice and translucent, very clear looking. So all of the nasty stuff that would typically tip you off to the fact that this oil is damaged or rancid is gone. So that's number one. Number two, these oils are used in so many products that are just ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They're very common in things like cookies, cakes, crackers, frostings and spreads, margarines, all those vegetable oil spreads that we all thought were so healthy in the 80s when everyone thought butter was so deadly for you. But the good news is that because these fats are in all that packaged, boxed garbage, most of us on a low carb or keto diet aren't eating that stuff because it's boxed, packaged garbage that is loaded with carbohydrate, right? That stuff is typically very high in sugar and starch. So we're not really eating that anyway. The reason the omega-6 may still be an issue on a low carb or ketogenic diet is because there are plenty of foods that many of us do include in our low carb diet that are very high in these omega-6 fatty acids, especially things like mayonnaise or things like salad dressings. A lot of the regular, more inexpensive things like ranch dressing, blue cheese dressing, Caesar, whatever you like, typically based in soybean oil. Sometimes they have canola, which canola is a little controversial. I'll leave that for some other time. Canola is mostly monounsaturated, but there may be some issues. Again, for one subject to tackle at a time, right? And so there's also what I would call naturally occurring. I mean, omega-6 is naturally occurring in soy and corn and cottonseed and grapeseed oil and all that. But when I mean in a whole food that we would also include in a low carb or ketogenic diet, things like pork and poultry do have omega-6, and they have more omega-6 than ruminant fat, things like beef, sheep, goat, bison, things like that, and a lot more than something in like wild game, like a venison, or other type of elk, that kind of animal. But the total amount of omega-6, even in something like pork or poultry, I'm just not worried about it. Compared to the load of omega-6 that you would get from things like mayonnaise and salad dressings and other condiments that are really high in those kinds of oils, the amount found in pork and eggs and poultry, I'm just not worried about it. But got to consult the notes here so I don't forget anything here. Okay, so let's get back to the fact that these are essential fatty acids, both omega-6 and omega-3, because there's something that I forgot. They're essential, so we need them, but we don't need much. Just because something's essential doesn't mean that more is always better, right? You can die from too much oxygen. You can die from too much water, right? Every year there's some article in the news about some stupid idiot fraternity hazing incident where they force some kid to drink gallons and gallons of water and they die from water intoxication, right? So just because we need some omega-6 and omega-3 doesn't mean we need a lot. And so you don't really have to go out of your way to get any of this if you're eating normal foods. Some of the stuff, some of the other things that we love on a low carb or keto diet that are high in omega-6 are nuts and seeds. All of our beloved almonds, our almond flour, our almond butter, our cashews, our walnuts, our macadamias are very high in mono, but most nuts and seeds will have a lot of omega-6. Now, I'll get to sources of omega-3 in a bit, but let's talk about the 6 for a little more. I can just emphasize again what I said earlier, that so many people who do a low carb or ketogenic diet don't pay any attention to the source of the fat at all or what kind of oil they're using at all, and they get absolutely fine results. They lose the weight they want to lose, the blood sugar comes down, the insulin comes down, the triglycerides come down, the blood pressure comes down, the gout goes away, all this good stuff happens. And remember, if you read Gary Taubes' work, especially his book, The Case Against Sugar, he was talking about how so many of what we now call the diseases of civilization, or the diseases that we associate with insulin resistance, like cardiovascular disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, gout, even PCOS. I mean, they didn't call it PCOS back then, but all of these issues were recorded by doctors in the 16 and 1700s. So as far back as a couple hundred years ago, all of these issues were known, they were recognized. And for the most part, they were known to be tied to too high of a sugar consumption. And here's the thing. So all of these metabolic issues existed back then. What didn't exist back then was the soybean oil and the corn oil and the cottonseed oil and the grapeseed oil and all this, because the manufacturing technology to process and to even extract these oils from those seeds didn't even exist back then. But what did exist was sugar. For the first time in human history, large amounts of refined sugar. So even before these oils were accessible to the public or to the populace at large, people were already starting to gain more weight than they ever had, to have all these weird metabolic problems they never had, to start peeing out sugar in their urine like they never did before. Okay, it was recorded in ancient Egypt that some of this happened, but you know what I'm saying in general. So I don't think we can really blame a lot of these metabolic problems on these omega-6 oils. I've read the studies, some of the studies anyway, nobody can read them all. An excess intake of these oils does seem to exacerbate some of these. It seems to make them worse, but I don't think that they can instigate it in the absence of the hyperglycemia, the high blood sugar, and the hyperinsulinemia, the high insulin. So I kind of like to compare it to, let's say you've got the pile of old oily rags over here, and you've got a lit match way over there. Well, we don't really want those two things to be anywhere near each other, but as long as they don't come into contact, it's okay. Bring them closer and closer to contact. Oh, then we've got a major inferno going, right? So is that lit match any problem at all in the absence of the pile of oily rags? If the lit match is the excess omega-6 intake, is a high amount of omega-6 in the diet a problem at all if someone doesn't have the oily rag pile of chronic hyperglycemia and chronic hyperinsulinemia? If those two things, if you only have the one and not the other, you're not going to have a fire. Nothing's going to go up in flames. So you see what I'm saying, right? I think it's the combination of the two that really makes the terrible situation. I don't really see the omega-6 being I'm not going to say it's not a problem at all. I'm not willing to go quite that far, but I don't think it's as problematic in someone on a low-carb diet who has low glucose and low insulin and all as well. And we know this, right? We know this because, again, plenty of people out there doing low-carb or ketogenic diets don't have the financial ability to buy fancy avocado oil and macadamia nut oil salad dressings for $6 a bottle. They're going to go to the store and they're going to get the soybean oil ranch dressing that's on sale for $1.99. They're going to get the blue cheese dressing that's on sale for 99 cents. And they're still going to get perfectly fine results. We can't deny that. I've done this myself. I've talked about this in previous videos where, when I started low carb, I was on a budget. I'm still on a budget. Writing doesn't exactly break the bank. I can't afford a lot of the food I see people eating online. I do the best I can. And even with including a lot of that stuff in my diet, especially earlier on, I was fine. I lost weight, felt great, mental clarity was good, everything was good. And I was eating the regular dressing. At that time, I was actually in the military and I would go to the commissary because food was dirt cheap. At that time, the 6-ounce can of tuna, the 6-ounce can that is now 5 ounces, which for this, everything is getting smaller for the same price. At that time, those cans of tuna at the commissary were 55 cents. 55 cents a can. You couldn't beat it for cheap protein. And sometimes I would get the cans in water. Sometimes I would get the cans in oil, not the olive oil, the can in soybean oil. And I did fine. I didn't drink the oil. I mean, I still drained most of it because that's what we do, but the tuna was still loaded with that oil, and I did fine. We should not make keto into some elitist thing that it doesn't need to be. If you're telling people that they can't eat that they have to make their own, they have to buy fancy olive oil, for $30 a bottle and make their own, or buy avocado oil for $25 a bottle, and every single condiment, every single dipping sauce, every single marinade has to be homemade, they're just not going to do it. And plus, it's not true. You don't have to do things that way. If you want to, by all means, do it. Do the best you can afford to do. If it makes you feel better, even mentally, to think that you're doing better, then great. But please, please don't fearmonger. Don't make people think that keto is not even worth doing if they can't afford fancy stuff, and if they're going to go to the discount store and get whatever is on sale as long as it's low in carbs. We see this on a daily basis in clinics of doctors who do low carb and ketogenic diets with their patients that are on budgets, that are eating the regular food, and they're still getting the desired results. So, all right, beyond that, I'm already at 20 minutes. I said this was going to be a little bit longer. I've got a couple more things to go with. I would say if you're new to this way of eating, don't worry about it. Don't even think about it. The only thing you want to look at on a food label when you're new to this is the total carbohydrate content. Don't worry about what kind of oil is in the product. If you get to a point where you've been doing this kind of eating for a while, several months, maybe a year, maybe more, and you're not getting the results you want, or your results have stopped, or the weight isn't coming off, your skin isn't clearing up, your joint pain isn't going away, other things are going on, maybe then look to decrease the amount of omega-6 in your diet. That wouldn't be my first step. The first step, the first most effective, most important thing about this way of eating is to keep your total carbohydrate intake low. This oil issue, the fatty acid issue, is a secondary, maybe even a tertiary thing. I talked a lot about omega-6, so let's talk about the omega-3 now. Omega-3, like omega-6, is an essential fatty acid, but we only need a very, very small amount of it. We need even less than we need of omega-6. We actually do require more omega-6 than omega-3. Now, you know what? Don't quote me on that. Erase that from the record. I'm not actually sure about that. I know that foods, even natural foods like ruminants, like pastured animals and all that, contain a little bit more 6 than 3. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we need more 6, but generally the food supply, even whole, unprocessed, real foods, have more 6 than 3. Anyway, we find omega-3s mostly in things like fish and things like ruminant animals, especially if they've been grass finished. All ruminant animals are grass fed at some stage in their life for most of their life, but the ones that are grass finished, they'll have a little bit more omega-3. To be clear, feedlot animals still will have omega-3. They'll just have less. So don't let anyone tell you they'll have none. They do still have some. They just have less than an animal that spends its entire life cycle on pasture. Egg yolks from hens whose feed is supplemented with fish meal or flaxseed will also be high in omega-3. Now, the type of omega-3 found in things like flax seeds and chia seeds and walnuts is a different kind of omega-3 than the ones, there's more than one, than the ones found in the cold water fish and the ruminant animals. You'll hear a lot of people say that the ALA, the alpha-linolenic acid found in the plant foods, in the flax and the walnuts and the chia, is useless. It's just pointless because the body has to convert it into the other omega-3s that are found in the animal foods. That is not true. It is true that that fat does have to be converted to the animal type, but there does seem to be a role for the plant form, for that ALA. So it's not useless. It doesn't do nothing in the body, but it's just that in addition to whatever roles the ALA may be doing, we need the others. The others are what you know as EPA and DHA. When you hear omega-3, that's probably what you think. That's what you think of when you think of salmon and sardines and mackerel and all that. So if you don't like fish or you're allergic to seafood, you can get all the omega-3 you need from eggs, from beef, from other food sources of these things. And the thing is, omega-3 and omega-6 compete biochemically for some enzymes in the body. So basically, in a nutshell, the more omega-6 you eat, the more 3 you need, because the more the 6 will crowd out the 3. And that's really the problem in the standard American diet. Not that we're eating omega-6 per se, but that we're eating so very much of it, so very much more than we've ever gotten in human history ever. Because like I said, the production technology for these fats didn't even exist, or for these oils, I should say, didn't even exist, until recently. So, a lot of the studies where omega-3 fat, supplementation doesn't seem to be beneficial is because they don't usually correct for an extremely high omega-6 intake. You can't correct a huge omega-6 imbalance by taking a little fish oil pill, and nobody should need an industrial sized bottle of fish oil that you get at the warehouse store. If you need to be taking fish oil in that kind of amount, something's up, I do think it's best to get it from food. And the way to correct that imbalance is not to bury yourself in omega-3 and guzzle fish oil all day. It's to reduce the omega-6. And like I said, by doing a low-carb diet, most people do that naturally because we're getting rid of all those cakes and cookies and crackers and frostings and margarines. Hopefully nobody's eating the margarine. Eat real butter, please. But you still might be getting some omega-6 from the dressings and oils and mayonnaise and all that. So if you're doing everything right, everything else you can think of right to get your keto diet working the way you want it to, and you're not getting the results you want, you've ruled out other things that I'll talk about in some other video, other things that can stall progress, especially fat loss, then maybe, analyze your diet. Oh, maybe I'm eating way too much omega-6. Maybe this is a problem for me and I should cut back. Let's see. Is there anything else that I forgot? Consult the notes here. I think that's about it. I will end by saying, I notice that when I overdo the omega-6, I do feel noticeably different. My skin, I wouldn't say it breaks out. I get some red spots, which I normally don't have. My skin is normally very clear, very nice looking. I get a little bit red, and I just don't feel as good. Maybe it's mind over matter. Maybe there's something to it. But it's not that I can never have that stuff. It's when I overdo it. And literally, I'm not allowed to keep mayonnaise in my house because I cannot control myself. It's a trigger food for me. And when I overdo the mayo, it shows itself in many ways in my body, and I can't do it. And I do also find, oddly enough, like Amy Berger confessional time here in this video, for some reason, with things like ranch dressing or blue cheese dressing or things like that that are soybean oil based, I really have a hard time with portion control. I could guzzle that dressing on anything, dip some pork rinds in it, and just eat a ton of it and not feel full at all and not feel satiated, not feel satisfied. And that doesn't happen with things that I either make homemade with olive oil or avocado oil or coconut oil, or things that I do buy from the store that are made from those oils. I don't seem to have the same lack of off switch with it. Maybe it's a different kind of palatability, although when I make homemade dressings, they're pretty darn palatable. I think they're delicious. And so it's not that they don't taste good. I'm willing to concede that there might be something inherent to the omega-6 fatty acids that just trip something up in my brain, in my appetite center. I don't know. So I do have to be careful, but I don't go out of my way to avoid those things at all costs. I don't eliminate them completely from my diet, but I do have to make sure I don't overdo it. And I can't give you an exact amount as to how much is overdoing it. Unfortunately, I don't know myself. I only know I've gone too far after I've already gone too far. As for fish, I love canned salmon. I love canned sardines. I love mackerel. I buy a lot of different brands. I have two here that I'll show you just for fun. I have zero sponsorship for these videos. I receive no money, no kickbacks, nothing. So these are just, I truly happen to like these products. I really love the Wild Planet brand. I've been eating these for a long time. This is the one in olive oil, but I've also bought the one in water. And I just moved to a new place that has the Sprouts Market. I've never been to a Sprouts before until a couple of days ago, and I bought again. This is the water, but I just tonight had the one in olive oil. They are delicious. It's probably the best sardines I've ever had is the Sprouts brand, the store brand. with the skin and bones, please, because that brings extra nutrients. I don't see the point in eating boneless, skinless fish. Why not get the calcium? Why not get that fat? I mean, a lot of that fat is under the skin. So I also don't really like boneless, skinless canned salmon. Why? So much of that fat that we want is right underneath the skin. And I like Vital Choice also, vitalchoice.com. I'm sure you've seen them around, or they sponsor some podcasts and some paleo blogs and stuff like that, and low carb blogs, so you may be familiar with them. I like them all. I even like, there's King Oscar brand that you can get at the supermarket, although, I mean, you can find Wild Planet at the regular supermarket too. There's a brand called Brunswick, I think, that's usually very inexpensive. Sometimes they go on sale 99 cents or 99. These, every now and then these go on sale $1.99 a can. You cannot beat that price. For this nutrition, for the kind of protein and omega-3s you get in canned sardines, for $1.99, you can't beat it. Ask for a case discount. Many stores, including regular supermarkets, have a case discount where if you buy a whole case of something, you get like 10% off, 15% off. Ask. It never hurts to ask. I stock up on these. They don't go bad. I do the same thing with salmon. It's awesome when stuff goes on sale that's canned and non-perishable. So that's it. This video is 30 minutes. Oh my God. Hopefully this will be my longest one ever. I really want to keep these short, but I hope that was educational. Don't be terrified of omega-6. If you like ranch dressing, enjoy your ranch dressing, because guess what? Maybe you're eating the ranch dressing still, but you're not eating the Cheez-It crackers and the cookies and the whatever else carby stuff that you were eating at one point. So you're still eating a lot less than you were. I'm going to sign off for now. See you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.